The sky was heavy with clouds, casting a gray shadow over the empty highway. Steve Harvey sat behind the wheel of his aging sedan, the miles ticking slowly beneath him as he headed toward the funeral of a family friend he barely knew, but felt obligated to attend. The weight of grief sat thick in the car, a heavy silence surrounding him as he drove alone through the fading light. After hours on the road, hunger nudged at him, a quiet reminder that life kept moving even when his heart felt like it was breaking. He pulled into a small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering weakly in the dusk. The kind of place where time seemed to pause, and strangers could become silent witnesses to each other's struggles. Inside, the smell of strong coffee and frying bacon mixed with soft country music playing low in the background. Steve took a seat at the counter, scanning the menu without much interest. Moments later, a woman approached a server named Jane, her silver hair pulled back loosely, eyes carrying stories Steve hadn't yet dared to ask about. "Long day on the road, isn't it?" Jane said gently, her voice warm yet tired. Steve managed a small smile. "More than I expected. Sometimes it feels like life keeps moving even when you want it to stop," he confessed. Jane nodded knowingly, wiping her hands on her apron before setting a cup of coffee in front of him. "I've been through some long days myself, believe me. Sometimes all you have left is your faith and a little hope that tomorrow will be easier," she replied softly. Steve looked into her eyes, sensing a shared loneliness. "How do you keep going when everything seems to be falling apart?" he asked quietly. Jane took a deep breath, then leaned in slightly, her voice lowering as if sharing a secret. "I trust in my prayers. They're not always answered the way I want, but they give me strength. And sometimes, that's all you really need," she explained. Steve's heart ached at the simple yet profound honesty in her words. He realized this chance meeting might be more meaningful than he could have imagined. Steve stirred his coffee slowly, the warmth seeping into his hands but doing little to thaw the chill he felt inside. "Jane," he began, "I guess I never really understood what keeps people holding on in the darkest times. I mean, I've seen plenty of pain, but sometimes it feels like hope just slips away." Jane looked at him with gentle eyes, a soft smile tugging at her lips, as if she had been waiting for this question all along. "You know, Steve, faith isn't some magic fix that erases pain. It's more like a steady flame burning quietly in your soul, even when the storms rage all around you," she said thoughtfully. She paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts as the diner buzzed faintly with other late-night customers. "When I lost my husband, and then my daughter a few years later, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I was angry, confused sometimes. I questioned if God even heard my prayers," Jane explained sadly. "But then I realized something important," she continued, her voice growing firmer. "God's answers don't always come as we expect. Sometimes the silence itself is a kind of answer, teaching us patience and trust. When I stopped demanding explanations and started listening, I found peace in that stillness," she said quietly. Steve nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "It's hard to see that peace when you're in the middle of the storm," he admitted. Jane smiled warmly. "That's exactly it. The peace isn't about having no storm. It's about trusting that the storm will pass and that you won't be walking through it alone. Prayer isn't just about asking for help. It's about surrendering control and believing there's a purpose beyond what we see," she explained. Steve's eyes glistened with unspoken emotion. "I guess that's what I need to find, that kind of trust," he confessed. Jane reached over and placed a worn hand gently on his. "You're not alone, Steve. Sometimes the hardest journeys teach us the most valuable lessons," she said softly. The night grew deeper, and the diner's hum settled into a comforting quiet as Steve and Jane continued their conversation. He felt an unexpected connection, as if he had stumbled upon a rare moment of truth in the midst of his own confusion. "Jane," Steve said after a moment's pause, "how do you keep your faith alive when everything around you seems to be falling apart? How do you stay hopeful?" Jane smiled wistfully, her eyes reflecting years of sorrow and strength. "It's because of faith, Steve. Not blind faith, but the kind that grows through struggle. The kind that says, even if I don't understand, I will trust. Every prayer I whispered in the darkest nights was a thread weaving me back together," she explained earnestly. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a sacred secret. "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Those words carried me through when I thought I had nothing left, Jane said with conviction. Steve looked at her, the weight of his burden suddenly feeling lighter. "I'm going to hold on to that. Trust in my prayers. Trust that there's a plan even when I can't see it," he said firmly. Jane nodded, her smile gentle but resolute. "And remember, sometimes the greatest miracles happen when we least expect them. You've taken the first step just by being open tonight." As Steve prepared to leave, he reached into his pocket and handed Jane an envelope. "This is for you, a small help to start fresh, and a reminder that you're never truly alone," he said kindly. Jane's eyes welled with tears as she accepted the gift. "Thank you, Steve. Trust in your prayers and you'll see how life begins anew," she said gratefully. They parted ways with a silent promise of faith renewed and hope rekindled. Steve gazed out the window as the first hints of dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges. The quiet hum of the diner felt like a fragile bubble of calm before the world woke up. Jane's words lingered in his mind, offering a flicker of light in the heavy fog of his thoughts. "I never imagined a chance meeting like this could shake me to my core," Steve said, his voice filled with both surprise and gratitude. "You've lived through so much pain, yet here you are still standing strong. How do you keep going?" Jane smiled softly, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and strength. "It's because of faith, Steve. Not the kind that ignores reality, but the kind that grows through it. The kind that says, even if I don't understand, I will trust. Every prayer I whispered in the darkest nights was a thread weaving me back together," she explained. Steve looked at her, the heaviness he'd carried beginning to lift. "I'm going to hold on to that. Trust in my prayers. Trust that there's a plan even when I can't see it," he said quietly but with resolve. Jane nodded, her smile warm. "And remember, sometimes the greatest miracles happen when we least expect them. You've taken the first step just by being open tonight. Life, more often than we'd like to admit, can be brutally unfair. No matter how hard we push, how much we struggle, or how fiercely we fight for control, things sometimes don't turn out the way we plan. There are moments when all efforts seem wasted, when doors close despite our prayers and hopes, and the weight of disappointment threatens to overwhelm us. It is precisely in those darkest hours when the world feels cold and indifferent that the simple act of trusting our prayers becomes not just a comfort, but a necessity. Faith isn't a magic wand that guarantees perfect outcomes. It's the quiet, steadfast anchor that keeps us grounded when everything else is falling apart. It is the light that refuses to be extinguished, even when the night seems endless. Steve's encounter with Jane was a powerful reminder that surrendering to this belief doesn't mean giving up. Instead, it means finding strength in the unseen, believing that every prayer whispered in pain is a seed planted for future hope. It is this unwavering trust, this quiet, resilient faith that allows us to keep moving forward when logic and circumstance urge us to stop. In a world filled with uncertainty and often unfair trials, faith becomes the lifeline that pulls us through. It is not about having all the answers, but about holding on to the hope that somewhere, beyond what we see, a greater plan is unfolding. And in that hope, in that trust, we find the courage to rise again. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.